All right. Here's just a little word about this episode before you hear it. We're continuing, obviously, with the series on consciousness, and this episode is actually out of sync with the previous one that you've heard, in the sense that we actually recorded an episode on an IIT paper, Integrated Information Theory, before the current one that you're about to listen to on Epiphenomenalism. And honestly, I think it was a combination of the paper and our disposition towards it, but I don't think that conversation was good enough to publish, and I don't think that paper was worthy of discussion. And it was also a bad paper to talk about on a podcast, because it contained, among other things, a lot of diagrams and mathematical layouts. I also just didn't like the paper, to be quite honest. So this one is a discussion that you're about to hear about epiphenomenalism. And honestly, I didn't really like this paper either. I almost considered not releasing this episode, but in the interest of continuity, I guess, with the series, and with respect to how important this paper was for our next conversation, I did want to release it, but, fair warning, we are very critical of this paper in this episode, and I think for good reason, honestly. So the paper is titled Epiphenomenalism Naturally, and it's written by William Robinson. It was published in 2003, and I don't know how well known this paper is. The reason I am familiar with it is because it was a paper that we discussed in one of my graduate seminars at Houston, and we rediscussed it for this episode. What you're going to hear is actually cut down from an over 3-hour recording session, but honestly, a lot of the conversation was just unbearable, even for me to listen to edit it down to, about an hour and a half, hour and 20 minutes. The conversation was honestly just us trying to parse what the paper was saying and follow Robinson's arguments in a way that made for atrocious listening. I think the problem with this paper, there's not just one, but it's a bad paper to be discussing on a podcast. That is very clear to me. But I also think the paper suffers from lack of signposting and the lack of kind of wrapping up sections in a clean way, telling you hey, this was the point of what was just discussed, and here's how it relates to the overall argument. We were very unsatisfied by how much work it took to understand what Robinson was saying and how it related to the argument he was attempting to build. So anyway, with that preamble, if you want, feel free to skip this episode, obviously. I think it grounds the next episode, which was on a paper that I really, really enjoyed, and I really enjoyed the discussion. But I feel like this was, this paper was good grounding to understand the context of the next conversation in the series. So with that, word of caution, please enjoy our discussion of epiphenomenalism naturally. I was just apologizing Giffin for starting or for getting delayed, because I told Adam I was trying to retrace. I kind of got lost in rereading the beginning of the paper. Not, I guess, lost in the sense of just lost track of time. Because I was trying to retrace. I'm okay, where does this paper locate itself in the debate? What is he trying to prove, and why is he trying to prove it?
Those are important questions.
Yeah, because the paper, Adam was saying, it's not a bad paper, but it's a complicated paper in the sense that he's talking about a lot of different things, and the format, the layout of the argument it's kind of complex, because you've got to keep in mind okay, because there's thought experiments, there's regresses, there's He'll put
reading it was
it
was very complex to read.
Yeah,
I would get lost in a sub argument rebuttal, and I'm what is he saying?
Yeah, no, because I'm like, okay, I gotta keep track of like the uppermost layer, like what's being, because this is like a reductio, so I've got to remember like, okay, what is this disproving? And then how does that relate to like I'm hoping I have some kind of like cogent or at least like coherent thoughts about like how that's being done, but that's what I kind of got lost in before like setting up the
It's
call.
so easy to get lost in. No worries at all.
There there
Sorry,
were there
I
were
showed up late.
there were four things I basically didn't spend any time with on the paper.
Hmm.
Um, because I did actually find time to read it twice.
Okay.
However, to read it twice, you cannot get mired in four things specifically. Two of them were the regresses, which I tried to follow, but immediately I began like, okay, well, but what about this? And then
Hmm.
so I'm like, okay, this is the thing I want to discuss. Then another is like, and the other two are, I'm hoping Jordan, you can clarify a little bit, but one is Dennett's proto judgments. I don't know what that is, so I kind
Hmm.
of just like accepted the fact that he's like, oh, it's very counterintuitive, and I'm like, all right, fair enough. So
Yeah.
like I'm like we can talk about
Yeah.
what proto
Then
judgment.
it said some counterintuitive things in the past, so why not now?
Yeah, I'm like whatever. And then what was the name of the other guy that he was responding to? Papano or Papano, whatever his name is. There's also Papano's response where it's just like
Hmm. Who was an
it's like
early
I
guest on the podcast, by the way. Like a
interesting.
very early guest, yeah.
So you can help with that too then because I'm like okay I'm just gonna take your word for it because once again there's Papano's jargon
Mm.
and Dennett's jargon which is like okay you kind of have to be familiar with both these papers to like really kind of read this section and be like yeah I see how that's a takedown of those respective arguments. It's like I don't know what a proto judgment is so
Yeah, yeah.
whatever.
No, I know because I was kind of almost like thinking about like how to even tackle this paper. Because like well I was editing the Chalmers episode that we recorded. And one thing that like it's completely understandable, but one thing that I was trying to edit out of the recording is that sometimes we would take a hyper dive into like one specific point, which was required, but it would take us like a lot of time, like sometimes like 10, 15, 20 minutes to figure out what a specific point was. Then we could kind of pop back out a level and say, like, okay, we understand this as saying this, but it was a challenge. Like, it was just more evident, like, listening back to it on a recording. It was like quite challenging, understandably so, to be able to like understand the very specific claims he was making, but also keep like your peripheral on how it mapped back to the argument. And like
Yeah,
I'm also thinking that like this paper is like it's even more treacherous.
It is so treacherous.
this is a real philosophy paper that like of course there are parts that I don't understand but that's okay like it's not I'm not like reading this and I'm like oh, this is hogwash like
Yeah, yeah.
so
What was that? What was that? The hogwash made me think of. It was one of the like most, or not unfortunate, but I just thought like, well, I'm not sure I would want this last name of Highslop. The guy,
oh yeah yeah
What a name.
I just thought like, that's gonna lend itself to some insults pretty easily. I was okay, so this is like I was thinking that it might make sense for us to attempt to discuss the paper at its most general and then like where we had like like maybe it makes sense to try to get a handle on like the overall structure of the paper and at least understanding what he's arguing, maybe if not why, and then the parts where we were kind of curious about like we can dive into.
okay
Does that sound reasonable?
Sure.
yeah
Okay.
I suppose
Well, here's maybe what I'll try to do is I did. This is what I got kind of caught up doing too, is I was just writing some like framing notes because I did realize like in hindsight, I'm like, you know what, this paper does. You just begin i- in the arguments. Like he's not taking really any time in the beginning to like lay out the kind of like larger domain in which he's making this argument. So I thought it might make sense, like for us, y- just as much as the listeners to like, because I was just browsing on the Robinson actually wrote the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy entry on epiphenomenalism too. So I
Hmm.
was browsing that a little bit before this, and here's kind of what I have as far as like where this paper is located in the debate. So, as we know, but it might make sense to reiterate for us and the listeners, epiphenomenalism is a theory on which conscious states are caused by the mind's physical substrate, which in our case is the brain. So, conscious states are caused by the brain, but themselves have no causal effect on the physical substrate. So, it's like a one-way asymmetrical causal route. And this has been, there's like a very central, very famous analogy that kind of, um, analogizes what we're talking about here, where like if you imagine like a locomotive going down along like a train track, there's
Mhm.
smoke billowing out of the train as it's moving down the tracks, but the smoke is a byproduct of the train's combustion and motion. It's not causing either of those things. While the smoke itself is intimately connected to and like inseparable from those things, it would be a mistake to say, um, wow, look at the smoke moving that train along, or like, causing the combustion. Um, and so the major source of pushback, or at least a major source, I don't know if it's the major source of pushback against epiphenomenalism is trying to make that non-causal or one-way causal view fit with our experience of feeling like the mental is causal. Especially in the propositional domains. Um, so that's kind of where like this paper locates itself. So Robinson is going to try to argue that there are strong intuitions that align with epiphenomenalism's putting forth of this non-causality, that mental events do not cause neural or brain events.
That is my understanding of what epiphenomenalism was, and I've been exposed to that example that you gave. And then in terms of this paper, yeah, it sounds like this is a paper about intuitions.
Yeah, yeah,
That is
because
the
he's
scope, which
hmm
I kind of did get lost in while reading it, and I had to like refer back to like, the
hmm
first page. But that's where I
hmm
where I landed, that he's trying to square intuitions.
yeah, because I take it that like, I mean, this is the way I'm putting it is not philosophically sophisticated, but like at the root of a lot of objections to this is this inescapable kind of like, okay, but it is just a part of our experience that the mental does play a causal role. So we've got to kind of figure out like, okay, if that's something that is so strong and epiphenomenalism is committed to denying that, as I think he says, like people have um, described epiphenomenalism as like a theory of last resort. So it's
Yeah.
like, okay, well, none of these other ones make sense. Like, I guess we got to sign up for that. And Robinson is going to argue like, no, no, actually, there are like very strong intuitions that when you examine like how they actually work and connect with other intuitions, they actually support epiphenomenalism.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think we'd have to see like because like when you ask whether you agree, it's like, is do I agree that that's what Robinson's trying to do? Like,
hmm
yes, I agree with that. But
hmm
like it's like, do I agree like intuitively that, you know, um kind of the subjective experiences have no causal role in action or slash behavior? Like it's not intuitive that's the case at all. You know what I
hmm
mean? Because I mean, like, there's like any classic example you can think of, but just someone that's just seeing red. You know what I mean? Because you're so angry by what someone did ultimately that you stab someone, right? It's just like, okay, yes. I mean, we'll get into like Robinson's argument about
Hmm.
just like, okay, the causes were there, to kind of affect neural properties in such a way that you get this new product output. You know what I mean? That then can then
Hmm.
it seems as though um, certain mental experiences are the cause, but really the causes are actually somewhere else for that
Hmm.
behavior. But it's
Hmm.
not as intuitive to me that's the case.
Yeah. So do we want to go through the numbers that we normally do?
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot. I was so wrapped up in like,
The framing is important before we do the numbers, in fact. So this is in the proper order. In terms of enjoyment, I'd probably put it at like a six or so. I think the main thing that like makes this less enjoyable is the fact that it was like structured in a way that made it very complicated to like as you said, like hold on to like the superstructure and like the above argument while like digging into like a proposal that he is trying to then describe as counterintuitive, or, whatever the case may be. That like made it very hard to kind of get through, and to the point that it did impact my enjoyment because I would have to like reread paragraphs or like go back to the start of the section and be like, okay, wait, where am I?
Mhm.
Um, but as for like kind of like the general thesis of like let's just talk about like intuitions and whether these map on, that made it somewhat enjoyable. Um,
Mhm.
because I thought that like in general just kind of like it allowed us to like reflect on like what our intuitions really are. And putting aside, well, I guess the second question is like whether I agree. If do I agree with the idea that epiphenomenalism is like intuitive? I think there he presents like some intuitions, but ultimately I think like the reason that this paper exists at all is because the idea that thoughts cause have causation power like on the physical world is just like the overwhelming, humanity's intuition because it's like our
Mhm.
experience. So, this paper almost is defeating defeating its own thesis in a little bit of a way. Um,
Mhm.
again, I think he succeeds in like some degree of like saying like, okay, hey, let's like examine these intuitions. But because he's trying to say that epiphenomenalism is intuitive, it's like it's really starting on the back foot. So I don't know. I guess
Mhm.
enjoyment like a six or seven, agreement, five or six.
I think this paper would have been like way more enjoyable to read if he did more of what one of my professors, I like this term, is like signposting. Like there needed to be more signposting in the paper of like,
Yes.
hey, you know, here's what I'm about to dive into. Hold this following thought in your mind. Here's the reason why I'm doing it. Then he dives into it. Then when he's done with that, he says, okay, remember, I'm making this point because it connects in this way.
Yes. Yeah, I had to like use like squiggly lines to separate paragraphs that I thought were discussing similar ideas. Like I did that throughout a lot because I couldn't refer back. Yeah. Like I
Yeah.
couldn't refer back
Yeah, yeah,
without
it's like,
like without like having to go back to like the very beginning of each section. Like and
mhm.
like kind of winding my way back through. So yeah. I guess Jordan, do you want to peg numbers?
Sure. How much I enjoyed the read, content wise, like a seven overall, because the style like a five, because it was just tough. It was a little bit of a tough like to keep
Yeah.
track of read. How much I agree with it, it's hard to say. I think I'm a little bit more friendly to this idea, maybe like a seven. Uh,
Yeah, that's fair.
where I
Yeah,
end
and
at the at the end of the episode could be
yeah,
different, but I think that there's some compelling arguments made here, but yeah, I don't know.
no, I think we should definitely do this at the end because I could sway like drastically. A lot of it depends on like the strength of what he's trying to do informs my agreement with it.
Yeah.
And that's something that's a little, you know, from like the very first like page, it's like, well, if it's just intuitions, like hard to like quantify that. But yeah,
Um,
Adam.
Um, terms of enjoyment of the paper, I'd say like 6 or 7. Uh, I thought there were interesting things, but some things were kind of just lost on me. Um, and then agreements, maybe like a 6, and then confidence in that probably like a 2 or 3. I mean, it's just not.
As always.
Yeah,
We,
I
we
mean,
just
I
For
we
mean,
all
just
of us.
don't get above 2 or 3 with these papers. Yeah.
yeah,
Supreme
we'll
ego to
see.
get to a 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I
The
know.
hubris.
So, yeah. So, I mean, there were moments when I was reading several paragraphs in a row and I was following it, and I'm like, I get it. And there were other ones where I'm just like, I don't know how that follows. So
Yeah.
we'll get into it.
So this was like my understanding where he's starting with, so remember the overall goal here is to argue that, okay, this tenet of epiphenomenalism, that the mental does not play a causal role on the physical substrate, that only the physical substrate plays a causal role on the mental, that's not something that's kind of impossible to square with our intuitions. In fact, there might be like, you know, upon reflection, some robust intuitions that align with that. So he starts with this kind of like core assumption, and he puts it pretty simply. He says that actions involve muscle contractions, and really what he's going to do from that like very broad assumption is he's going to kind of generalize it. So it's not actually about muscle contractions. It's that actions are the result of these like finely structured mechanisms. That involves muscle contractions. It involves neural firings. He's basically trying to paint this picture of like you can trace it, you know, deeper than just like it's not just an action, it's an action connected with this like causal chain of mechanisms. Um, and in doing that, he makes this point that I actually don't know how it connects with the rest of the paper, but I from what I understand, it's just a point maybe in defense of the assumption, the generalization of the assumption. He makes this point that neural states are more complex uh, and contain more information than the phenomenal states that they're connected to. So it's hard to see how the latter, how phenomenal states could determine neural states or brain states. Um, I think, like I said, I actually, one thing I'm unclear on is how that connects to the overall argument. But it is kind of like a point he takes pains to make. So I wanted to note it. Then after that, he makes this distinction between qualitative events and propositional states. So when we're talking about qualitative, we're basically like talking about something that's non-cognitive, like the raw sensations of like pain or heat or color or something like that. When we're talking about propositional, we're talking about cognitively heavy things. We're talking about beliefs or desires, um, those sorts of things. And they, because they are different, they relate to epiphenomenalism differently. So he kind of has these like pairs of arguments then for the rest of the paper, essentially, where so he's going to focus first on qualitative events, and he's going to make the argument that they are fundamental. And what he means by that is that they're not identical to neural states. So when you combine this idea that like that qualitative events are not identical to neural states, when you combine that with the first assumption, you get the conclusion that that the qualities of these qualitative states, like the pinkishness or the heat, um, they do not cause actions because they're not identical to the neural states, and because actions themselves are reliant on that kind of regressive mechanism chain. These things are disconnected, like once you get back to that. Obviously, the argument's more complicated than that, but I think that that's the general form of the argument. And that's different than the argument relating to propositional states. To summarize that real quickly. So, beliefs or desires, these kind of cognitively heavy things, they're different than qualitative events in the fact, with respect that they are simply neural properties. A belief is like nothing more than exemplifying neural firings. And he uses this kind of central like pump analogy. So like believe he's going to say that like, if you being a pump isn't actually like anything in and of itself, it's actually just like this set of mechanisms working to move water. And in the same way, believing P isn't something like in and of itself, it's an outcome of brain firings that sort of produce this belief. Um, and so he's going to say that, like, okay, well, we've got to explain this kind of like common view that our words express our thoughts. Um, and one way you can kind of think about that is to say, okay, thoughts are, and I should explain really quickly that, the reason why this is relevant, why do our words express our thoughts? Like, why is that relevant? It's because the expressing is the action, and that's like the physical. And if they're expressing our thoughts, you might think, okay, well, that's showing that there's causation from the mental to the physical. Um, but that's not going to be the case because one way to kind of think about this idea that words express our thoughts is to say, okay, well, what are thoughts? They're kind of subvocal sayings. You say these thoughts to yourself. When you express them, you say them to other people. But he's going to say that that's wrong. It just doesn't fit with our like. It can be the case, but he's going to say that's wrong. It doesn't fit with our like fundamental experience of what thoughts are. So he refines that. Okay, maybe thoughts are unconscious events that match our utterances. He's going to say that's wrong. And he uses the regress argument that we've been talking about to argue that. So he says, okay, neither of these formulations work. So what he lands on is what he calls the new product view, which is that thoughts are a product of brain processing. Those brain processes themselves do not match the content of speech, but they explain it and give rise to it. So that's kind of what I have as far as like the overall structure of the paper. Just to maybe like bring it back around, I mean, what he's saying is relevant there because he's trying to explain how, especially in the latter case, even though it seems intuitive that the mental causes the physical, when you dig into the details there and you try to square it with other robust intuitions you have, you realize that actually, no, we've got to arrive at the view that the mental is actually, even at this level, a byproduct or caused by the physical. So in this way, and he needs to tie the bow on this a little bit more at the end of the paper, I think. But it's like in this way, okay, if you buy these arguments, you have not, it's not that you've made an argument for epiphenomenalism, but you've undercut the legs of the most compelling arguments against epiphenomenalism. I just want to stop talking at this point. So where do you guys want to? I mean, that was just my attempt to kind of like frame the paper to some degree. So like, what do you guys want to do from here?
First, I want to say that was extremely useful, Jordan. Like, I'm glad you did that.
Yeah, it was good.
Okay.
Do we want to discuss the pink after image, or do we think we can all just kind of agree at this point that it seems intuitive that kind of experiential properties are not identical with neural properties? So maybe I'll just read the paragraph to kind of get us started on that. So consider then a pink after image that you might have after fixating on something green and then looking at a white wall. You know that there is no pink on the wall, pink spot on the wall. You do not believe that there is something pink in your brain, or if you do, that is because you think there is always something pink there, not that there is something pink just now when you are having the after image. Intuitively, the color pink is somehow involved in the situation, but it is not involved by being the color of any physical thing. You know how you produce the after image. You fixated on something green and then looked at the wall. if you know something about the physiology of color perception, you have some ideas about the neural events that produce this occurrence of pink, but that knowledge will not remove the intuitive appeal of the idea that the color pink is currently manifested, but it is not manifested by being the color of any physical surface. Okay, so I mean, I think we all follow that idea pretty well, but then he goes into commitment to materialism opposes this intuitive view. And it is necessary to give a brief uh, review of three main lines of thought on which such opposition may rest.
Pause.
One, yeah,
Sorry, I just wanted to flag for myself, right? This is within the context of his argument that qualitative events are sort of fundamental, right? And what he means by that is like, so when he says that commitment to materialism opposes this view, he means that like materialist objections are going to be trying to argue that qualitative events are not fundamental. They actually do just reduce to like more cognitively heavy things, which themselves are just results of neural firing, correct?
yeah, yeah,
Okay,
most certainly.
okay, okay.
Yeah.
So, sorry, I just wanted to make sure like I was on the same page. Okay, so sorry, continue. These materialist objections are going to be what?
So one may follow Dennett in saying that there is, in fact, no pink present, but only a proto judgment to the effect that something pink is present. I think I will have many philosophers, including many materialists, on my side if I point out that this is as counterintuitive a view as one might advance.
So like a judgment in philosophical terms is something that's cognitively heavy. Like a judgment is more than just a perception. Um, so if Dennett is trying to make the argument that what's happening here is a proto judgment, I, like you, I don't know what Dennett means by proto judgment, but I think he's trying to say, well, it's this kind of like cognitively light thing or something like that. Um, so if it
But
is
what do
that,
you, but, okay,
mhm.
go keep going.
um, so if Dennett is saying, okay, um, there's no pink present, but only this sort of proto judgment to the effect that something pink is present. Dennett's trying to put this purely qualitative thing and reduce it into like cognitive terms or cognitive sort of like aspects or features or like parts, whatever. If he can do that, then he is reducing it to purely the outcome. Like it's he's collapsing this distinction between the qualitative and the propositional. So he's saying, I think I'm trying to like channel Dennett here. And he's saying like, okay, when you see the pink after image, you're actually making something close to a judgment or like a basic version of a judgment of like, oh, I'm seeing pink on the wall. And Robinson is saying, no, it's not fundamentally anything like a judgment. It's just this raw, fundamental, qualitative experience.
Okay, let's get into two to see how
Okay.
that is distinct from some of these other ones here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so others may say too that the color pink is in fact identical with the property of being a neural event of a certain kind. So, and he's referencing himself here. So,
Mhm.
in Robinson forthcoming A, I explain why it is impossible decisively to refute this proposal. But if we have to choose between saying pink is identical with a neural property and that it is not so identical, I think intuitive view is clearly the one that denies such an identity. In considering this case, it is important to be clear that the claim at issue is not that the claim that something that exemplifies pink is the same thing as a thing that exemplifies an occurrent neural property. So, so you're saying like the kind of difference there is that, well, maybe we should get through all three before, aren't
Yeah.
there three given here?
There are three. The third one comes later. Could I maybe say for now, like I I'm in the same boat of like not really kind of deeply understanding what's going on here. The reason why I was on Robinson's side is kind of from our previous conversations, even like back to years ago, where I do think the intuitive view is not to say that um, it is not to say that ink is identical with a neural property because like it just we've kind of made this point in other context where it's like it's not obvious why, like seeing pink would be associated with certain neural firings and not others, which is
Mhm.
not to deny that it is, but it is to kind of put a wedge in the identity claim.
No, I completely agree with that. I think it's more so like I understand two, what is being said by two.
Hmm.
I want to know what is being said by Dennett. So I'm hoping that like by
Okay.
going through two and three, by saying like, okay, two is making the claim that really just the experiential pink is really just a property of of neural. It's just a neural property. Like,
Hmm.
okay, that is what two is saying, really,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So
And three is
so
actually in the
that
middle of the next page.
okay. And I like the example once again, the one you just gave right there, which is like, okay, so the ratio of firings of neurons are 5, 3, 7, 2, 13, 8. And it's like, okay, um, the intuitive view is that no neural event property is the property thing. So
Hmm.
it's like, where could that be found in,
Yeah, like
the
where's the
ratio of
pink in
firing
that?
of neurons? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's like you can imagine that represents something, some sort of abstract kind of information structure, but like how is that, you know, the
Hmm.
qual of pink? So,
Hmm. Hmm.
okay. So I guess Papineau is or Papineau, it's probably O, Papineau. Um, so he's the one that actually we're looking at like the third kind of materialistic view, and that's Papineau's view, right?
Hmm.
Okay, so let me read the final line of the previous paragraph that kind of leads into Papineau's view. So the intuitive view is that no neural event property is the property pink. Some materialists give backhanded recognition of this intuition by attempting to explain it away. The clearest attempt of this sort I know of is Papineau's 2002 conceptual dualism, according to which phenomenal concepts are different from material concepts, scientific concepts, although there is just one property of which both are concepts. Okay, so one property, two concepts. What is special about phenomenal concepts, and what is supposed to explain our intuition that they are concepts of something other than neural states, is that when phenomenal concepts are used, the property of which they are concepts is actually instantiated, at least imaginatively, whereas this is not the case when we use material concepts. I reject this explanation for the following reason. Suppose I use the phenomenal concept pink. Okay. Then, according to Papineau, the phenomenal property pink is instantiated. I am either introspecting an experience of the right kind, or I am imagining something pink. The problem I see for Papineau's account is that the instantiated property is supposed to be the same as some material property, but nothing neural is present in my experience. Papineau's account has no way of accommodating this fact. If there is just one property and it is present, then it is present. It seems that Papineau would have to say something like, it is present as pink, but not as neural state such and such. But there is nothing in his account that allows him to make any such distinction.
Okay. I think that did clarify it a bit because try to put this in my own words. Okay, suppose I use the phenomenal concept pink, which when he says phenomenal concept, he's obviously referencing like the phenomenology of pink, not anything to do with like the neural
Yeah.
state of seeing pink. Then, according to Papineau, if they are actually the same property, then I'm either introspecting on an experience of the right kind, or I'm imagining something pink. But he's going to say, like, obviously, I don't have to be doing either of those things. Um, you're just using the concept pink in a way that you don't have to. I mean, even there, like when I'm talking about this, like I'm not introspecting about an experience, and I'm also not imagining something pink. I'm just like using the phenomenal concept.
Because, like, okay, suppose I use the phenomenal concept pink. Okay, let's actually use the phenomenal concept pink, right? Like,
Hmm.
let's imagine pink.
Hmm.
Wouldn't that be using the phenomenal concept rather than just talking about it?
Hmm.
So, like, I can
I'm thinking
imagine
about pink.
something pink. Yeah, okay. Then, according to Papineau, okay, so I think that helps me get more on board with it rather than just talking about it
Hmm.
or
Yeah.
thinking about pink. It's like,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
you actually need to like visualize pink to,
There's no pink in front of me. I'm imagining pink. So let's
Hmm.
proceed forward.
okay, so then according to Papineau, the phenomenal property pink is instantiated. Okay, I am either introspecting an experience of the right kind or I'm imagining something pink. Okay, the problem I see for Papineau's account is that the instantiated property is supposed to be the same as some material, i.e., neural property, but nothing neural is present in my experience.
I'm getting a little bit lost in this because like I don't. This is where it needs more signposting. Is like I don't know what the
Yeah.
success conditions of. I'm a little bit lost as to like okay, like what's the I don't know what the success conditions of either person's argument are right now. Like let alone who I agree with. Here's let me just step back out a level of analysis real quick. I'm on board with the rejection of the first materialist view that the phenomenology of pink is not a proto-judgment. I don't think there's anything cognitively like belief or desire based or anything even like proto those things going on. There's no proto-cognition there.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
For other related, unrelated, no, well, related but not present reasons, I am tentatively on board with signing up for the second rejection of materialist assertion that the phenomenal pink, the color pink, is not identical with like the property of being a neural event of a certain kind because of what we said before, where it's just like it doesn't seem. I'm not denying that that they are linked, but that they are identical, that there's like an identity claim there. I'm I'm okay with like very tentatively, obviously saying like that seems false, but not saying that like I reject Papa now because I don't understand it yet.
Yeah. I
This,
also don't understand Papineau. Um,
Mhm.
I guess to say one final word on it, I'm on board with the fact that they are not identical, but like I wish that Robinson here addresses like
Mhm.
the link that he would, still endorse,
Yeah, I
right?
agree. I
That
agree
makes sense
because
because like I don't think pink actually makes sense without reference to like the brain because like pink doesn't manifest on the electromagnetic spectrum. Like it kind of needs the brain to like be coherent as a concept, but it is not identical to the experience of pink, right?
yes, yes,
That's kind of
which
like what we're willing to endorse.
yeah, and
Yeah,
I do
Okay.
think that's he's making the argument that somehow if you believe that that is aligning with what he's saying, but we're just gonna have to table like,
Okay.
exactly why for
Okay.
now.
Yeah, no worries. I just wanted
Yeah.
to get that final thought out.
it's good to reiterate that because it's like, yeah, as both of you have already said, like when you really pull back and you're saying like, do we think it's identical to a neural property? Like, no, but I
Yeah.
also like don't
Mhm.
really buy like at least how he's attacking Papanow.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, okay, fine, like we'll just
Mhm. Mhm.
it's our intuition to begin with, so we might as well continue. So
Sure, sure. And maybe that's for right now at least. Maybe the Papa now is slated to be the next read, at least tentatively. So
Yeah.
yeah,
okay. Um Can I just read the paragraph at the bottom of 4 going into 5 then? Because I it
Sure.
almost is
Put
just like
our
a flag.
intuitions together.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Let's put our intuitions together. 1, our actions, including, of course, our linguistic actions of whatever kind, so speech acts, are caused by our muscular events, which are caused by neural events, which are caused by neural events, which are caused by inputs from our bodies and our senses and our reentrant connections. Okay, good.
Endorsed.
Yes, endorsed. 2, many qualities in our qualitative events are really exemplified, but are not identical with properties of neural events and are not sufficiently accounted for by the representational properties of neural events. Tentatively agree. The conclusion is that these intuitively plausible views suggest that the qualities of our qualitative events are not causes of any of our actions, including those linguistic actions in which we report our qualitative events. In my own words, it's actually a very simple argument he's making that to support is hyper complicated. But the way I'm seeing this is he's saying, okay, all of our actions, including speech acts, are they've got this like, causal chain of mechanisms going back um, to neural events. And those neural events are, themselves like caused by inputs from like the physical world. Um, so, okay, that's the causal chain. But what we've seen is that um, the phenomenal is not the phenomenal is not identical to the neural part of that causal chain. So if it's not identical, while it is connected, it's outside of that backwards chain. So all he's saying is that, okay, look, well, if you look at the causal chain, you see that as an identical part of that is not our like phenomenal experience. So it can't be, so the mental, to like circle back to the tenet of epiphenomenalism, so the mental qualitative parts of like our experience are not causes of our actions. They themselves are, well, I guess that part's actually kind of left undefined yet, but they're not part of like the causal chain.
I'm going to read the
Yeah.
next paragraph too.
Okay.
So it this kind of just drives it home. It's a point. It's the one he already brought up, but
Hmm.
so to turn the suggestion into a firm declaration, we need one more assumption, namely that our actions are not routinely overdetermined. So two brief points will, I think, suffice for our present purposes. A, even in its abstract form, overdeterminism is a counterintuitive proposal. If one accepts the first intuition that our neural events are sufficient causes of all our actions, the natural conclusion will be that there is no room for anything else to make a causal contribution. One need not deny that someone could be dying of a heart attack brought on by the fright at the moment a bullet also enters the heart. The problem here is to make such an analogy plausible in the cases at hand, i.e., the cases of reporting on the qualities of one experience. B, the point I contributed to wound. How do you
Wundt?
say that guy's name?
Want.
Is it Wundt? I don't know.
Wundt.
Wound?
Would it be like the
I think
German?
it's like bunt cake. So like Wundt. Wundt.
Wound?
I don't know.
Namely, that the simplicity of our experiential contents relative to the complexity of the neural events that would be required to cause a report also speaks against overdeterminism. That point just seems right to me.
Hmm.
That is, raising the abstract possibility of overdeterminism does nothing to explain how the sensation of pain or the pink in an after image should be able to get a grip on the myriad ionic transactions that would be necessary to cause neurons to coordinate our production of the word
Mm.
pain or the word pink. And it's like, yeah, I mean, we're
Hmm.
talking about like trillions of interactions um, being determined by, you know, and also just like a highly coordinated trillions of actions,
Hmm.
being coordinated by being like caused by relatively paltry information. And it's like,
Hmm.
that doesn't sound right. So I do buy that. Okay, so I conclude that if we know the relevant science, it will be natural and intuitive to think that neural events, and only those, cause our actions, including linguistic actions. And it is, in any case, natural and intuitive to regard the property of painfulness or pink as distinct properties from event properties such as ratio of firing rates or patterns of times of arrival of action potential in particular places in the brain. And if we put these intuitive views together, the outcome is epiphenomenalism. So it's like, okay, if you buy that, as Jordan, you said earlier, it's like one directional in the sense that, like, neural properties, in some sense, cause uh, experiential properties or qualitative events, um, but not the reverse.
Mm.
And you also buy that these qualitative events are not identical to neural events, then you get epiphenomenalism.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah. And it also, I'm kind of just, this could be completely different than any argument he's making. Could be kind of like a way to reformulate it or something. But it is like, this is kind of related to the overdetermination point, I think. But I'm kind of trying to just think about it in my own, like, my own way for a second. Because it's like, okay, it seems like, it's extremely firm. We're on firm grounding to believe that like the neural causes the conscious experience. Um, so that's like one direction. But maybe you want to deny epiphenomenalism and say, well, sometimes, or at least like we don't know how often, or if it's like a frequency thing, or it might happen all the time, but the mental also causes the neural firing. Then I think like if it's a two-way directionality, you do have to kind of explain like how it perfectly aligns all of the time, which is like kind of a
mhm.
different way of putting his point of the overdetermination, where it's like, if I do like imagine pink, you kind of have to explain like why it's like if like seeing like in my mind's eye pink is causal in the direction of like the seeing is causing my brain to fire and like see the pink, but also my brain firing is causing me to see the pink. Like, why does it? Yeah, it's like you're like adding kind of like weirdly you're adding layers that always have to align so that you don't have, I don't know, something like the Chalmers dancing qualia or whatever going on. Whereas like if they didn't align, you'd be having like both experiences at once or something like that. It's kind of interesting. I'm getting the I'm getting I'm at least understanding the idea that you might say, okay, sure. Like I'm thinking of like the argument against epiphenomenalism here. I get why he addresses like the maybe we should move to the propositional next because I do get like why an opponent would say, okay, sure, that's a good story for qualitative experiences, but what about propositional ones where it's like if I desire a donut or I believe that um, you know if I believe let's stick with the desire. If I desire a donut, that really is like a causally that plays a causal role in my either verbal action requesting a donut or going to get a donut. That's a harder story for the epiphenomenalist to square. Do we want to move to that?
Mhm.
Because I,
Yeah,
Yes,
for
I
yeah.
sure.
I feel the pull of that like argument. Okay.
Yeah, it seems common for someone to be able to say or report like, why did you go get the donut? Because I desired it, right? Like that
Hmm.
seems to square with intuition. So I think
Hmm.
this is
Yeah.
a little bit
Hmm.
harder of a
Hmm.
scenario. Yeah, the claim WT, our words express our thoughts, might be a good way since we've already introduced
That's
what
good.
a
That's
propositional
good.
uh
Yeah.
state is.
Yeah, that's no, that's actually that's a good place to start. I guess there is a conflict between materialism and epiphenomenalism in the sense that this is the I don't like just thinking here like Epiphenomenalism does seem to be arguing for a sort of dualism, but again, it's kind of like a Chalmersian, like naturalistic dualism, where like the phenomenal is not identical to the material, but it's like even more bound by like the natural laws in this because it's not even causal. It is like it's an epiphenomenon. Like it's just a byproduct of.
I suggested we started with the WT, our words express our thoughts, because that's kind of like what he says, like, let's focus our discussion of thoughts on epiphenomenalism by considering a claim that is unlikely to be disputed. Our words express our thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's relevant, like just to signpost again for us, like this is relevant because our words are like, actions we undertake with our speech. And if they express our thoughts, that's not it's not saying that they're caused by our thoughts, but it's going to be like very synergistic with the anti-epiphenomenalist intuition that, the mental can cause the physical in them, like with respect to propositions. So
Yeah.
when
On
we
the
say
scale
like what we
of,
think, yeah.
yeah, I was going to say, on the scale of like intuitions, this suggests causation.
I mean, okay, so like I think I hopefully kind of laid this out correctly in the intro. He's going to move through three different kind of like versions of what this general sentiment, our words express our thoughts, could mean. He's going to reject the first two and then land on the third, but argue that the third is in alignment with epiphenomenalism, and while the first two are like opposed to it. Um, so the first, like, okay, so he's basically saying like when we say our words express our thoughts, what do we actually mean? Like, what are we really saying by that sentiment? Uh, okay, so then the third premise is an action expresses a thought if and only if that thought causally contributes to it, where the thought has a content and the action is appropriate in light of that content. So again, he's just kind of like making an elegant little argument where it's just okay. Um, if what you mean is that like, what's a thought? It's just the occurrence of kind of saying something to yourself. That will like, that it presents itself in a speech act if it aligns, and maybe it's not showing up as a speech act. Maybe it's an action itself. Like I said, if I desire a donut, maybe I don't request a donut. Maybe I reach for the donut. Um,
Yeah.
so he argues that this actually can't be the correct way to understand the idea that our words express our thoughts, though, because it creates a kind of a repugnant conclusion. Um, so this is second paragraph, starting with the second sentence on 11. But if we put these three together, we get a view that I think most will find intuitively repugnant, for it is a consequence of these three that my overt utterances express my thoughts only if they are causally dependent on subvocal sayings with the same content. And this consequence is manifestly false. It is true that I can repeat out loud something that I have just said to myself, but my ordinary speaking is not like that. I am not in general reading off what I say out loud from my subvocal speech. I do not ordinarily have a subvocal speech when I am speaking out loud, and when I do, it is usually subvocal speech that runs counter to what I am saying out loud. E.g., I notice some infelicity of expression and need to add something later, and so on, which I just put two check marks next to that, where it's like that is exactly meshing with my experience of like what like I can't even like when I'm talking to you guys right now, like I'm not like mentally in my mind kind of printing out like what I'm gonna say and then like repeating it out to you guys. Like I'm just it's there is no disconnect there.
Yeah.
There's no
Yeah. No, I agree.
middleman.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, yeah, there's no middleman. So he's basically he's saying this can't be right because he's undercutting um MT 1.1, which is where this whole thing kind of started with. So a thought is not an occurrence of like saying something to yourself. Okay, so he's going. That's going to make him give up. We're going to have to reject like the first formulation and move to a second.
Can I add something, Jordan?
Hmm.
So the phrase that I think we skipped over briefly within like the second problem, the last paragraph of page 11, is like the postulation of unconscious causes with content. And I think that kind of phrase was what I highlighted as kind of like that's what's being explored when we're talking about like kind of content in like the in the I guess the regress, right? Um so that's kind of like the that postulation is um what I was kind of framing around.
No, that makes sense. MT 2.1, thoughts are unconscious events that have a content that can be matched by the content of utterances. Okay. 1.2 or 2.2 and 2.3 are the same as before. Um, if you say something, it expresses a thought if and only if that thought causally contributed to what you said. Okay, agreed. That, or it's at least plausible. Um, and an action expresses a thought if and only if that thought causally contributes to the action. Okay, I
Yeah, I'm happy
understand.
with all that. Yeah.
Yes. Now, where's the regress? Okay. Let's first note that WT is obvious. Okay. In fact, the situation is so odd that it requires an explanation itself. Postulating unconscious causes with content that matches our utterances is thought to be plausible only because it is thought that such causes are required in order that our utterances make sense, i.e., that they be accidental, or not just like thoughtlessly babbling. Um, okay, so if we're not thoughtlessly babbling, what does this mean? If not that the verbal production is itself guided by, causally dependent on, an immediately prior representation of that content. Let me
Once
try to
again,
put.
I'm not totally happy with that, right? Like
Hmm.
it's there.
Yeah,
So there is
yeah. When you
verbal
say,
production, and there is content underlying that, and there's
mhm,
some sort of causal chain. Like I just for me, like right now, just so
mhm,
we're all on the same page, I just imagine there is some sort of, for lack of a better word, like data structure in place in the brain that is kind of it's holding on to like, okay, this is representing some sort of, for lack of a better word, thought, right? Because it's like
mhm,
here are how these different things
mhm.
interrelate, and there's some
Yeah,
organization of the
yes,
brain that maps to that. Okay,
yes, yes.
okay,
Yeah. If you're saying something, if you're not thoughtlessly babbling, we like make sense of what that means by saying like, okay, what you said like matches the content of something inside your mind. Like,
yeah, and it's like, and we can
yes.
imagine the causal chain, like it's
Hmm.
there's kind of reliable determinism in the sense that like it's not like there are potential inputs between that
Hmm.
state and the words you're uttering such that it gets garbled in the end. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like some.
Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah, I totally buy that. Okay.
Okay, cool. So now we're going to move to non-linguistic actions. So reaching for a donut. Um, the corresponding view would be that in order for our actions to be appropriate to our thoughts, meaning like they make sense, what they align with our thoughts, there must have been an event in the action's immediate past that is guiding the action, and in which the content to which the action is appropriate was represented. Okay. So we think that if you're reaching for the donut and it's not like a thoughtless action, it's not a thoughtless action because it is being guided by or caused by some prior thing, and the content of what you're doing, reaching for the donut, matches the content of the prior thought, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, continuing. So all this is going to be wrong in the end.
Yeah.
But if this is the right explanation, there's an issue. This is because there's no way of cutting off an unfortunate regress. if prior representation of a content is required in order for an overt utterance to be non-accidental, then prior representation of a content is required for a subvocal saying to be non-accidental. Okay.
Okay, pause,
Yep.
pause. Okay, so I want to read that again here. So if
Hmm.
prior representation of a content is required in order for an overt utterance to be non-accidental, not unthinking, then prior representation of a content is required for a subvocal saying to be non-accidental, not unthinking. Okay, yeah, that's
Hmm.
fine. Like,
Hmm.
because
Agreed.
they're two different things right there we're talking about, right?
Yes.
Like either speaking it or there's some sort of subvocal
You're saying it to
saying.
yourself.
Yeah,
Yes.
like it's,
Yeah.
but okay,
But
fine.
either way, like, yeah, because you're saying it to yourself. Okay. And the same point applies to an inner saying that is modeled on subvocal speech, even if it is held to be unconscious. I'm not immediately parsing that. Um,
That's like
same,
that's what it entirely relies on. That
and,
sentence.
and the same point applies to an inner saying that is modeled on a subvocal speech, even if it is held to be unconscious. Okay, so is what he's saying maybe like, um, if you say to yourself, like, if you think to yourself, damn, I really want a donut. For as from the previous sentence, if that's to make sense, it's matching this sort of content. The subvocal saying is matching an unthinking content, right? Um, if the same point applies to an inner saying that is modeled on subvocal speech, and the same point applies to an inner saying that is modeled on subvocal speech, even if it is held to be unconscious, is it like, is he talking about like, okay, like the urge? Is it like the very, like, okay, so an inner saying that is, I don't know what that phrase means. What's an inner saying that is modeled on subvocal speech? Is it like, is it just like almost,
Donut.
yeah, is it kind of like that? Like, is it just like the content of the desire itself? Like,
Very unclear.
so he's saying even the urge, is he saying even the urge itself needs to have, if it's not going to be accidental, it itself. So if your urge to have a donut is going to be more than accidental, it has to have content that itself aligns with like something even deeper, like your desires over time, or like your, like the fact that you,
Well, it seems like it was supposed to be like an immediately prior representation of the content, right?
hmm
That's
hmm
like the idea.
I actually don't
So
understand that.
yeah, I don't think I fully understand his argument. But to the extent that like that last sentence doesn't make sense, that does is supposed to support his broader claim that we should cut off the
The
regress.
regress, yeah.
And that would like damage one of the pillars of the intuition
hmm
of WT.
Yeah, because Giffin, I get what you're saying there, which is
hmm
like we're kind of going back to the like basic matching theory here, which is like as you're saying, the immediate prior cause like should have the content that maps to either utterances or behavior or subvocal thought or speech. But I don't know why earlier states before those have to map perfectly. You know what I mean? Where it's like, why does it have to map perfectly at every single stage in the regress? Like, couldn't there just be
Is is
kind of
is
like a
is
bubbling up effect of like a bunch of different things kind of come together to that are then kind of
mhm.
interpreted at a higher level, and then right before at the top, like there should be some sort of translation either to action or speech.
I had the exact same thought, Adam, and I'm wondering if you look at what he's saying in the next paragraph, he's saying like, okay, so if it's not going to be infinite, what you said is exactly right, which I agree with. It seems like it just kind of bubbles up from like, whatever. And he says, okay, so like we have to just admit our ignorance. We don't have a good theory of cognition. So like we actually don't really understand how like because I think he doesn't spell this out, but maybe what he's saying is like, okay, we need an explanation for where this comes from, like the content wise, right? And he's saying there are two options. One could be the infinite regress, where it's like always been there, or two, what you're saying, Adam, and what like I agree is kind of my experience as well. Like it just kind of comes up from nowhere. But like once it's there, then what matters is that, you know, my desire aligns with like what I think to myself, aligns with what I say, aligns with what I do. But if we're kind of going to that, then we have to just admit that what we're saying is we actually don't really know where it comes from. We don't have a good theory of cognition.
But I don't disagree too much about what you're saying there, but like keep in mind, like he is using the regress to reject the matching theory that he just laid out, that
Hmm.
we kind of on some level agree with.
Hmm.
That, and I read that matching theory again, where I'm like, okay, utterances and actions reflect some kind of unconscious content in the brain, and it's like, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, I don't know how this regress we can deny that.
Hmm.
Like, I just I don't see it.
Yeah, I'm trying to do my best to like formulate what he's arguing. He's yeah, he needs to spell it out.
So
Yeah.
you do understand at this point, like his what he's trying
No,
to do?
no, I'm saying
Okay.
I don't. I'm trying to give my best interpretation. I agree.
And I also feel like I don't think this is even like too helpful of a comment, but I also feel like this is just it's such odds with I guess like my more like materialistic view that he's like kind of like especially that he's built up to this point here where it's like
Hmm.
I don't have to know about everything that's going on, but I can imagine a brain state that just receives a bunch of input. There's a bunch of chemical reactions, and we arrive at some unconscious kind of like content
Hmm.
at that point
Hmm.
that will then either lead to action or overt speech. And it's like, okay, well, the action and overt speech should map the content that all the input led up to, right? It's like, yeah. And it's like, no, it's actually it falls prey to a regress. And it's like, does it though? I mean, what is wrong with that conception that I just laid out, like from a very, very high level? So
We regard speech, whether subvocal or overt, as a product of brain processes, none of which need to have a content. The brain processes themselves do not have a content that matches that of our speech. He's not denying that they do produce the content, but the brain processes themselves don't have the content in it. Kind of goes back to like the pinkishness almost, where it's like there's no it's like we do know that like the brain is like responsible for seeing pink, but at the level of the brain's firing, there is no pink there. It's the same with like a desire for a donut.
Yeah, for me, I was trying to like square it with like again, like the way that I was like reading this section
Hmm.
was kind of like
He,
with reference to unconscious causes with content as kind of the thing that like is used to rebut, I guess,
hmm.
the matching theory. Because like the
Yeah.
content ultimately can't go back, can only go back
Hmm.
only so far without it becoming a bit absurd to think
Yeah,
about.
because there's no like
That's the basic.
exactly like he's basically saying like, okay, we know the content is not present in like the synapses itself. You know what I mean? Like, so at some point, it's got to kind of emerge from somewhere, and we don't know where that is right now. But so he's not denying that the causal chain goes back to the synapses and it just, the random inputs from like the world, but the content certainly can't because like the content can't be present in like the atoms, or whatever. Like that doesn't even, that's like a nonsensical thing to say.
Yeah, where the
So,
intuition might be present in subvocal speech, it becomes less and less the more we think about different types of thinking, different
mhm,
types of thoughts.
yes. And so like w- where this is all connecting back to like epiphenomenalism is that on both versions of the matching theory, it seems as though the mental is driving the physical, but he's going to say no, actually, uh, for different reasons for both of them. But then that's why he puts forth his new product view, where he's saying the idea behind the name is that the content of an utterance can be a new product, i.e., one that does not need to be copied from the content of a prior event. So it's about the content here, like not the causal chain, because the causal chain does go backwards. Um, the new product view is plainly incompatible with MT in both its forms. There is nothing in the new product view that has a content that an utterance could be matching. There are no thoughts left if these are conceived of as they are in MT. But now one may worry about what happens to WT, our initial kind of like very, very robust idea that words express our thoughts. That is, what sense are we able to make of our words express our thoughts if there aren't any thoughts for our words to express, or like if the content doesn't propagate backwards the whole way? The reading, so that's the central question. Here's his answer. Our words are produced by a cognitively organized brain. They express our thoughts if and only if their content fits coherently with other productions of the same brain. So he's saying it's not going to propagate backwards, but we've got to, so we can, uh, we're going to be able to make sense of like our thoughts if and only if their content fits coherently with the rest of what our brain produces. Skipping down to the end of that paragraph, in general, one's utterances fit in with the environment, with one's other utterances, and with one's actions in a coherent way. They are non-misleading reflections of the condition of one's cognitive organization. That is what it means for an utterance to express our thoughts. So if I'm understanding him, he's making like kind of an alignment like view where, so if our utterance expresses our thoughts, it means that we just like we're endorsing it because it's like aligning with the rest of like our cognitive production, not that not that the content of our thoughts goes backwards all the way. Ah, he's losing me here.
So, Adam, do you have any final thoughts to
I
express?
I feel like there was a
I,
version of
you
this
know,
that just he needs to conclude really differently than he does, I think. He needs to put this together more succinctly. Because I'm losing track of the argument.
In a discussion of intuition, he says things without like grounding them in like intuitive like expressions that we can understand and then relate to the other subsequent ones.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, Giffen, honestly, just frustration. Like I eat it as far as I see it, and I don't want to go down
Hmm. Hmm.
this conversation again. Either matching theory is really stupid, and what it's putting forward is actually like so moronic that bringing it up is to smack it around, just to kind of put forward like your own new product theory, or it's actually quite plausible still in my eyes. And all he's doing with new product is taking matching theory and renaming it new product because he beats on the old one, on the
I see.
kind of a very simplified version of matching theory. Because it's like, as far as I read that, the first four times, five times as we continue to read that, what was important to me was content being reflected, not content being replicated. So if it was
Mhm.
like, if it's like, okay, yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah, it's not a facsimile of whatever content is being held in the brain. Fine. So I don't want to go down this argument again, but it just
Mm.
seemed like I didn't see anything profound in reading that, and that could just be me, but I'm frustrated. So
I'm frustrated for like other reasons where it's like I wish he because I'm actually even looking at the conclusion, and I don't know, the conclusion doesn't like, I don't know. Usually a conclusion is going to be like, okay, let me like, now that I've like really broken down the pieces, let me put it together again. You know what I mean? Like, let me really spell out the argument here. But he
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 doesn't even
kind of almost
conclude.
like, no, he kind of actually like raises almost like a different thing.
I shall close by considering briefly a point raised by
Yeah,
high swap.
it's
That's
like
not how you conclude.
no, because here's the thing is like I don't maybe to people who are like working in this domain, like maybe the point's already all too obvious, and like now it is time to kind of reflect on other considerations. But like for us, I mean, it's just not. And I because my frustration is like I really wish he didn't because it's like okay, with like adding what Adam said into like my own view at this point, it's like okay, maybe I'm confused about like either what he's saying or how he's saying it. But there's a large part of like there's a large part of me that is on his side about the intuitions, but he's not doing the job of like tying the bow for me. You know what I mean? Like I need to understand how my very specific intuitions about like these cases leads back to, oh, whether, upon reflection, my intuitions actually don't really go against epiphenomenalism. You know what I mean? Like my intuitions, do support this kind of core epiphenomenalist um, assertion that the mental does not play a causal role on the physical. Like I'm not getting that. I'm not getting that.
Yeah. Do we want to, are we willing to like wrap up at this point? Do we want to
I
give some
am.
numbers? Maybe that'll be cathartic.
Let's give new numbers. Let's give new numbers. My enjoyment of the paper, it's dropped. Like it's dropped to it's like a 4 because I believe that there's good stuff in here, but it so suffers from signposting, and he needs to put these conclusions. He needs to put this together for me. How much I agree with it, I I'm dropping my like 7. I think I said like 7 or something. I'm dropping it to a 6 because it's like I do think that I agree with what he's saying, at least in large part, but I'm less confident as to how it relates to epiphenomenalism at this point. Um, yeah, I, I, my overall thing that I'm leaving with is like frustration with kind of him actually, like not really the view, not really the paper. I'm a little bit frustrated with Rob. It's not Robertson, it's Robertson.
Robinson,
Robinson. So
right?
Robertson. Yeah,
I
Rob
have like two professors who have like similar names, and I kept like butchering it.
Robinson.
So that's my bad.
Robinson. I'm a little bit frustrated with him actually.
Yeah.
I wanted more from the conclusion.
All right. Should I go next to give Adam the final word?
Yeah. Let him
No,
drive
I
the
mean,
state.
it's just like once again, like I acknowledge there are things I'm possibly missing with this paper, but I will say like my entire life history, you know, would speak to if I don't understand something, that's fine. I often don't understand things, but if things are explained to me several times and I still don't understand them, I begin to get a little suspicious about hogwash at that point. Once again that's nothing definitive that I am not missing something. Because I could be, but once again, life experience would tell me otherwise. That either the conclusion, I don't know, I don't know, I don't want to get back into it, but it's
Sure.
Put some
something
numbers to it.
something was lost on me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Something in that paragraph was deeply lost on me, and so that being a kind of a key thing of the paper, I mean, I'd say I'd have to go down to like a 2 or a 3. Like there were things I
Mhm.
liked up until that point, and then I hated that, and
Yeah.
so agreement like a 2. Like it wasn't like the paper itself wasn't hogwash. There's something about that
Mr.
that just
Robinson is hogwash. You should get out here and rebut.
I I mean I think I might spend a little time on my own kind of going back into it,
Hmm.
just like, okay, have other people put forward this matching theory? Like, what do they mean by number two? Like, are they
Yeah.
saying something a little more sophisticated than what he takes down?
Hmm.
Because maybe it is that stupid, and maybe I'm on Robinson's side. Maybe there's in fact like everyone doing matching theory is in fact a big time fool. So I don't know. So
No, those seem like
I
accurate numbers
yeah.
and accurate statements. Yeah, I think I started with my enjoyment as like a 5 or 6. I'm willing to bump that down to a 3 or 4. It just
Yeah.
like if we're trying to dig into it, it's very rare that like we truly just cannot grasp the like not only
Yeah.
what is being said, but like how it relates to like previous and subsequent things. And like the structure of this, the way it is written, is like a massive barrier, which is sort
It's
of the opposite of the project of philosophy in general.
no, I agree. That
And then,
that's why I'm so frustrated with like him in a sense. Like,
yeah, I see. Here's the thing, like in terms of like how agree with it, I think I started as like a 6, and I'll bring that down to like a 5, or 4, because like the general like broad prospect, like here's how I feel. Ultimately, the imagery that Jordan started with, where there's a train going along and there's steam coming out of it, and like the steam is consciousness, and it's the steam itself isn't driving the engine. Like I can nod like along with that kind of like framing.
So
So
can I.
to some
Yeah.
extent, like I feel like a little bit of like an epiphenomenalist. The extent that like I need to be satisfied with like Roberts Robinson's like kind of takedown of our like intuitions and like destroying the previous intuitions and rising up new ones in favor of epiphenomenalism. Like he really didn't get me there. I'm still nodding along to the train steam analogy more than I am like the takedown of like the infinite regression or that kind of like line of thinking. So no, I'm very very frustrated by him more than anything. Laying
yeah.
this out again. Maybe like in 2000 or whenever this was published, like he's speaking to like a slim group of people who all like truly like can follow this clearly, but like it's just not the case for me either. Like I'm like grasping onto a few kind of key terms, trying to map my intuitions onto, and it's just like it's failing within like moments, and that's just like a huge detriment to the paper. So
And
I'm just gonna
maybe
be
maybe
nodding along to the little steam engine. That's
yeah, I mean, like maybe a quick aside too. Maybe matching theory is kind of a figment of Robinson's imagination too, because the first one that he proposed was extra dumb. You know what I mean? Where it's just like all thoughts are really just subvocal speech.
yeah,
It's like, oh, well,
it's an
that's
absurd
evident.
way to
Yeah, like,
start.
it's like, well, that's
Hmm.
evidently wrong. Then he goes to the
Hmm.
next one and he's like, well, it could be, unconscious, representation of content. And it's like, that sounds right to me.
Yeah.
And then it's like, but it's not the same content though, like exactly. And he's like, yeah, I get that, Robinson. He's just like, well, then discard that too. And it's like, okay, but like, was that really the point?
That's so well put. It is absurd to me that like
Like
we had to
it's
go through a page of like discussing like this nonsense thought that like thoughts are just occurrences of subvocal sayings. Like is that what the discussion was? It's like, I actually would love to. I think the matching theory, like that whole like concept that he debunks, might just be like a straw man constructed. Like, are there matching theorists like out there in the field that like he was like addressing the substantive points of, or was this just building it up to knock it down? Like,
yeah, I kind of feel that way. I hate to say it, but like even number two, you're like, well, our intuition is in fact like verbatim, word for word. We're saying what our thoughts represent. Our thoughts are represented exactly by the words we're saying right now. I'd say, no, actually, I didn't come into that with that intuition. That's not really the intuition I came into this conversation with. And once again, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I really, really don't understand his enterprise here. But and keep in mind, even with all my complaints, this paper this week was still much better than IIT. So I'm just saying there are levels to this, and it's like the IIT was like, shit, that was a really, really bad one for us to do. This one, I don't feel that way. I'm left a little frustrated after the paper, which is kind of a big difference between the IIT, because that one I'm just like, damn, what a waste of time. Like, it just. All right, guys, I should hop off now.
Yeah, go be productive.
I woke up at 7:30, began reading around
Oh.
8. My second reread. So I've been consciously doing this or the reading for like 5.5 hours. So
Nah,
go do something else, get yourself some food, etc.
Yeah.
But I am
Giffin, I'm gonna hop off this call, get lunch. Just it's gonna take 2 seconds, and then I'm just gonna hop on Discord.
I'm downloading Marvel Rivals right now.
Okay.
You guys can get the ball rolling on that, and if you guys enjoy the game, fuck it.
We'll be the test. We'll be the test case. All right.
Sure.
I'm fine with
All right.
that.
See you guys.
Adam, see you.
Talk to you later. Bye.
I've started a new Instagram. You can find that by searching for the username is Plato's Cave Podcast. That's all one word, no apostrophe in Plato's. You can find me as you could before on Twitter or X at Jordan_C_Myers. And my website, jordanmyers.org, is going to be updated shortly. It's a good way to sort of, I guess, either get in touch with me, you can contact me through there, or it's also a place that I'm going to trying to use to upload sort of recent work of mine that I'm in the process of developing.